In 1978, 918 people died in the jungles of Guyana. They weren't murdered, they weren't attacked. They chose to die. Most of them were ordinary Americans. Teachers, nurses, farmers, parents. They had given up their jobs, their savings, their families, and eventually their lives, to a man named Jim Jones. And here is the thing that should disturb you most. They were not weak. They were not stupid. They were not mentally ill. The research shows that cult members are, on average, more educated and more intelligent than the general population. So how does it happen? How does a rational, intelligent, functioning adult end up in a jungle, drinking poison because someone told them to? The answer isn't faith, it isn't madness, it is psychology. Specifically, it is a set of techniques so precise, so well documented, and so devastatingly effective that researchers have given them a name: coercive control. And once you understand how they work, you will never look at persuasion, influence, or authority the same way again. This is Dark Mind. Let's begin. Most people think they could spot a cult. They picture robes, a compound in the desert, someone ranting about the end of the world. But that image is wrong, and it is dangerous, because it means most people never see the real thing coming. The clinical definition of a cult has nothing to do with religion or appearance. It is defined by one thing only: a group that uses systematic psychological manipulation to gain and maintain control over its members. That definition covers religious groups, but it also covers political movements, self-help organizations, multi-level marketing companies, and online communities. You may have been in one without ever knowing it. The first technique every cult uses is called love bombing. It works like this. You are going through a difficult period, a breakup, a job loss, a move to a new city. You are lonely or uncertain or searching for something. And then you meet these people. They are warm. They are interested in you specifically. They listen to everything you say. They make you feel seen in a way you haven't felt in years. Within days, they are your closest friends. Within weeks, they feel like family. This is not an accident. This is a strategy. Love bombing is the deliberate, calculated flooding of a target with affection, attention, and validation, specifically designed to create rapid emotional dependency before any manipulation begins. You don't join a cult because of its beliefs. You join because of how it makes you feel. And by the time the beliefs become apparent, you are already emotionally trapped. In the 1980s, a psychologist named Robert Lifton spent years studying survivors of thought reform programs, what most people call brainwashing. What he identified were 8 specific conditions that, when applied together, could reshape a person's beliefs, identity, and behavior without their awareness. Later researchers refined this into what is now called BITE model: behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. Here is how each element works. Behavior control. The cult regulates what you eat, when you sleep, how you dress, who you spend time with, and how you fill every hour of your day. This is not presented as control. It is presented as discipline, community, a higher way of living. But the effect is the same. A person with no private time, no independent routine, and no space for reflection cannot think clearly. They can only respond. Information control. Outside information is restricted, discredited, or forbidden. News, books, websites, and former members are labeled as dangerous, corrupt, or spiritually harmful. The only trusted source of information becomes the group itself. This is one of the most powerful techniques in the entire system, because a person who cannot access outside information cannot compare, cannot question, and cannot leave. They have no frame of reference except the one the cult has built for them. Thought control. The cult installs what researchers call a thought-terminating cliché, a phrase or concept that shuts down critical thinking the moment doubt arises. That is your ego talking. You are being tested. The outside world cannot understand what we have here. Every time a member begins to think critically, the thought is immediately terminated, not by force, by a phrase they have been conditioned to apply to themselves. Emotional control. The group controls the emotional environment completely. Happiness, peace, and belonging are available, but only through compliance. Doubt, dissent, or outside connection produce guilt, shame, and fear. The emotional reward system is entirely controlled by the group, and a person whose emotional life depends entirely on a group's approval will do almost anything to maintain that approval. Now, here is what makes this so clinically significant. None of these techniques require a charismatic leader. None require physical force. None require a remote location. They can be applied in a suburban church, a corporate training program, a relationship, or an online community. The mechanism is always the same. Isolate the person from outside relationships, control their information, replace their identity, make belonging conditional on compliance. The most uncomfortable finding in cult psychology is this: intelligence does not protect you. In fact, the research suggests it may make you more vulnerable. Here is why. Intelligent people are more likely to be idealistic, more likely to believe in a cause larger than themselves, more likely to commit completely once they have decided something is true. They are also more likely to rationalize, to take new information and find a way to make it fit their existing belief system rather than updating it. This is called confirmation bias, and it affects intelligent people as severely as anyone else, sometimes more so because they are better at constructing justifications. The second reason intelligence offers no protection is timing. Cult recruitment almost never happens when a person is at their most stable and secure. It happens during transitions, starting university, moving to a new city, ending a relationship, losing a job, losing a parent. These are the moments when even the most rational, grounded person is temporarily unmoored. When the psychological need for belonging, purpose, and certainty is at its highest. And those needs are entirely human. They are not weaknesses. They are the things that make us who we are. The cult is simply very good at finding those moments, and very good at being exactly what a person needs until it is too late to leave. Margaret Singer, the psychologist who spent 40 years studying cult survivors, said this: "The question is never why did they join? The question is always, what were they searching for? And did the cult provide it?" The answer in almost every case is yes, at least in the beginning. We need to return to Jonestown, because the question people always ask is not how did they join? It is, why didn't they leave? By 1978, there were people inside People's Temple who knew something was wrong, who had watched friends punished for doubt, who had seen the violence, who had written desperate letters to family members on the outside, and they stayed. The psychology of why people stay in a cult is one of the most important and least understood areas in the field. There are several reasons, and they compound. First, sunk cost. By the time a member begins to have doubts, they have typically already given years of their life, their savings, their outside relationships, and their identity to the group. Leaving means admitting that all of it was a mistake, that everything they believed was false, that the people they trusted most deceived them completely. For most people, that is psychologically unbearable. It is easier to continue than to confront the magnitude of what was lost. Second, there is nowhere to go. The cult has systematically destroyed the members' outside relationships. Family has been cut off. Former friends have been labeled as dangerous. The outside world has been described as corrupt, fallen, or spiritually dead. Leaving means stepping into a world the member has been taught to fear, with no support network and no sense of identity outside the group. Third, and most important, the member's identity no longer exists independently of the group. This is the true endpoint of thought control. The person does not just believe what the cult believes, they have become someone who believes it. Their name, their purpose, their understanding of themselves, all of it is now inseparable from membership. Leaving the cult means ceasing to exist as the person they have become. That is why 918 people died in Jonestown. Not because they were weak, because by November 18, 1978, the psychological architecture of leaving had been completely dismantled. There was no self left to walk away. Here is what the research actually tells us about protection. Understanding these techniques does not make you immune, but it does make you significantly harder to manipulate. The 3 warning signs that researchers consistently identify: any group that isolates you from people who love you, any belief system that cannot be questioned from the inside, any relationship where your belonging is conditional on your compliance. These patterns appear in cults, but they also appear in relationships, families, workplaces, and communities. The mechanism is always the same, only the scale changes. Jim Jones told his followers that the world outside was the danger. The research tells us something different. The danger was always inside the room. If this video made you think of someone, share it with them. Subscribe to Dark Mind for a new documentary every week, and leave a comment below. Have you ever encountered a group that used any of these techniques? On any scale, I'll see you in the next one.